Good morning. It's 8 o'clock here in Warsaw, Poland. I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News in TVP World. A Russian general has been killed in Moscow in front of an apartment block after an apparent bombing. His assistant was also killed in a blast. Reports indicate a scooter exploded just as Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov exited the building. Footage from the scene shows the entrance of the building burned out and two body bags on the ground. Kirillov was the head of the nuclear, biological and chemical defense forces of the Russian army. The Ukrainian intelligence service SBU had charged him on Monday on mass deployment of banned chemical weapons in Ukraine. US President-elect Donald Trump does not rule out the idea of Ukraine giving up part of its territory to Russia, pointing to the extensive destruction in the occupied areas.
Do you believe that Ukraine should cede territory to Russia?
Well, I'm going to let you know that after I have my first meeting. But a lot of that territory, when you look at what's happened to those, I mean, there are cities that there's not a building standing. It's a demolition site. There's not a building standing. So people can't go back to those cities. There's nothing there. It's just rubble.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the first North Koreans have been killed in war in Ukraine. During his Monday evening address, Zelensky said that Russian authorities are attempting to hide real losses among North Koreans, just as they do with the Russian army.
The commander-in-chief of the army has presented a report on the participation of North Korean soldiers in battles on the side of the Russian army. There are many details about the destruction of these forces. According to preliminary data, the Russians are trying to hide the North Korean losses. The Ukrainian defense forces and our intelligence are uncovering the full picture about the real losses of Russian units, which also involve Koreans. Unfortunately, we also have to defend ourselves against them, although there is no reason for Koreans to die in this war. The only reason is Putin's madness, which has gripped Russia and is fueling the war.
Єдина причина – це божевілля Путіна, яке охопило Росію і підживлює цю війну.
It's the first time Ukrainian forces have reportedly encountered North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian units in the Kursk region. Oskar Terji has the latest.
The North Korean government has claimed that its forces have engaged with North Korean troops in the Ukrainian occupied regions of Kursk, Russia. This announcement came via Kiev on Monday, reporting that North Korean troops have been involved in frontal assaults for the first time. Now, President Zelensky spoke specifically about this in an address to the Ukrainian people. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
Russia drew one more country into this war to the fullest extent. If this is not considered to be an escalation, then what is the escalation that so many people are talking about? It is Putin who is widening and prolonging this war. It is him who is pushing back against any future peace agreement. He wants to add more problems for the world in Asia. That's why Russians are teaching modern war to North Korea.
Now, the fighting was reported in several villages around the Kursk region. No mention so far of any of them being deployed into the Ukrainian side of the conflict thus far. Kyiv believes that North Korea has as many as 11,000 troops currently stationed in the Kursk region of Russia. And the concern is that they may start seeing many more of these assaults from North Korean troops on Ukrainian positions in the future. It's Oskar Terji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
The United States is preparing to impose new sanctions against Georgia's ruling party over concerns of democratic backsliding. The country has been gripped by anti-government protests since the government suspended EU accession talks until 2028.
We have been greatly concerned about the state of Georgian democracy, the actions that Georgia Dream has taken to undermine Georgia democracy. You saw us just on Friday impose 20 new visa restrictions on individuals affiliated with the government who have been responsible for undermining democracy in the country, and we will have other actions that we're prepared to take in the coming weeks.
Speaking after the meeting of the EU Foreign Affairs Council, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said that while EU sanctions against Georgia have been blocked by Hungary and Slovakia, individual member states could still impose sanctions on the Georgian Dream government on their own.
Of course, membership in the European Union is a privilege, not an imposition. And so we will respect any decisions taken by Georgia, but we sympathize with the people of Georgia. And of course, we condemn the use of violence against protesters. But the discussion was, and the decision was blocked by Hungary and Slovakia.
While peaceful pro-democracy protests in Tbilisi continue, authorities have intensified measures aimed at discouraging public participation. Strict regulations are being imposed on citizens in effort to suppress dissidents. Our correspondent Don Arleth is on the ground in Georgia and has more.
Another day of the protests here in Tbilisi continues. This comes as, well, finally the Christmas tree here in front of the parliament has been lit, although protesters were able to thwart the official ceremony to do so. However, today is also the last day of President Zhorobashvili's presidency. She is now supposed to step down. She says she will not step down. What happens tomorrow remains to be seen. But as far as the Georgian Dream Party is concerned, another way that they have cracked down on these protests, and that is the increase of administrative fines and penalties for protesters taking part in these marches and demonstrations in front of the parliament. So just to give you an idea of some of the new provisions, an individual may be detained for the reason of preventing a repeated administrative offense, even though he or she has not committed a new offense. So this gives police the power to arbitrarily arrest people that they suspect could engage in some kind of provocative or illegal behavior. Now also, any partial or full blocking of motor traffic will entail a fine of 5,000 lire or more here in the capital. That is about almost $2,000. That's a huge fine for those attempting to block traffic. Now, we've seen this in these marches in the preceding days, that several marches started in various points in the city, and indeed they did choke traffic, grinding the city to a halt. So this will be quite a significant fine for those people. Now, the use of fireworks at rallies or demonstrations will be punished up to 5 years in prison. This is a very hefty sentence, if you will, for those that are using fireworks. Even if you use a laser beam, we've seen a lot of laser beams pointed at police officers that were standing on the sides of the parliament. You could be fined up to $600 for such an offense. Now also for those protesters who cover their face or use masks, that will also be punished by a fine of around $650. Of course, if people can't pay these fines, they will face jail time. And so it seems that these new provisions that the government has rolled out is having an effect on these demonstrations. There's much less people in the streets now than there was just a few days ago. And of course, very peaceful protests. However, many people telling us that they will continue to show up here night after night until they get new elections, until all of the 500 plus people who've been detained in these protests have been released. But of course, those new elections are the most important thing for Georgians who want free and fair elections. Reporting from Tbilisi, Don Arleth, TVP World.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has been ousted in a non-confidence vote, triggering snap elections. Polls indicate a likely victory for the opposition Christian Democrats, who are poised to form a new government.
The Bundestag put the final nail in Olaf Scholz's political career, refusing to grant his now minority government a motion of confidence. Only 207 out of 733 MPs voted for the current administration to stay in power. The move was expected by the Chancellor, who called the vote himself.
After an election, all Democrats must be prepared to work together for the good of the country, to build bridges and forge compromises. This is not possible without moral maturity, decency and seriousness, but only with a sense of responsibility for our entire country, for all citizens.
The coalition government, composed of Scholz's Social Democrats, the Greens and the liberal FDP, collapsed in November. The FDP's disapproval of administration's spending policy led it to exit the coalition, paving the way for early elections. Opinion polls predict a win for the opposition Christian Democratic Union in the upcoming vote, although not by a wide enough margin for it to govern alone. All three coalition parties are projected to lose seats.
In this situation, the most probable remains either so-called Grand Coalition, so coalition between the Christian Democrats and the SPD, however, without the participation of Olaf Scholz and his supporters, or least probable option, a coalition between the CDU, CSU and the Greens.
For the last 3 years, the Christian Democrats have been led by Friedrich Merz, who revamped the party's platform. To combat Germany's economic stagnation, he proposes tax cuts. He has also put a greater focus on combating illegal immigration.
Generally speaking, moved towards right. So it was like coming back to the CDU came back to its Christian democratic conservative roots, so to speak, both in terms of economical policy as well as when it comes to approach to the worldview.
Merz has also been a vocal supporter of Ukraine, proposing deliveries of long-range missiles to Kyiv.
Our position is clear, as is that of my parliamentary group. We want to enable your army to reach military bases in Russia, not the civilian population, not the infrastructure, but to reach the military targets from which your country is being attacked.
The anti-immigration Alternative for Germany party is expected to double its seats, although it is unlikely to enter the coalition.
This party is stigmatized, it's isolated, it is an outcast basically in German politics, and no other party wants to coalesce with it, wants to be an ally of this party.
Scholz proposed that the snap elections take place on February the 23rd. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier holds the final say on the date, having until December 27th to make the decision.
The Joint Expeditionary Force Security Summit in the Estonian capital of Tallinn is entering its second and final day. The members of the defense group are discussing a wide range of European issues, including how to counter Russia's covert operations in the Baltic Sea. The Joint Expeditionary Force, which consists of 12 European countries, has agreed to crack down on the notorious Russian Shadow Fleet. The fleet of civilian and foreign registered ships is used by Moscow to gather intelligence and circumvent sanctions. European countries encountering suspected Shadow Fleet vessels have agreed to exchange information and coordinate proof of insurance of the vessels. If the requests are ignored or denied, the Joint Expeditionary Force will then act in unison. The members have agreed. The group of European NATO countries is led by the United Kingdom. It was created to ensure a quick threat response even before any NATO Article 5 has been declared. The United States has warned Poland against overreaching with national security measures after Warsaw announced plans to include 2 privately owned TV networks on a list of strategically vital companies. The move gives the Polish government a final say in any future sales of TVN and Polsat. The Polish press agency reports that, according to the US State Department, any fight against foreign interference should focus on real threats and not become part of domestic political fighting. The Polish government has added private broadcasters, TVN and Polsat, to a list of vital companies after it was rumored that TVN was a takeover target. Potential buyers include a business entity close to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and a company owned by the son of the late Italian media magnate and former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. Warsaw argues that such takeovers could risk TVN falling under Russian influence. TVN toes a centrist and liberal editorial line and is currently owned by US company Warner Brothers Discovery. Polsat is currently not subject to any takeover rumors. And this concludes this edition of World News, but stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching and see you soon.